Mark Packer. ACC PM on your ACC network, and I asked him earlier, would you like to come on and be the ACC's Paul Finebaum? And he respectfully declined. He would rather be the ACC's Mark Packer. Sir, how are you?
I'm good, Adam. What's happening? By the way, your diatribe about narrative-changing games could not be more spot on. That's 1,000% correct.
But what bothers me, because I guess it was a Dabo Sweeney rant that, and it wasn't even his team that got screwed last year. It was Florida State's team, and of course the ACC, indirectly gets screwed out of a team in the college football playoff. Which off the topic, I actually think the playoff committee until last year had gotten every year all four teams correct. Maybe not the right order. I don't think they had made a mistake in the 4-team playoff era until last year, and they made the worst possible mistake, but that may be a different topic of conversation. But changing the narrative will only happen with winning more games.
That is right, actually on both fronts. But, for the record, kind of tying both of those together, I mean, the ACC had a winning record straight up against the Southeastern Conference, which I think all of us would agree is the standard in college football last year. And despite that, Florida State did everything they were supposed to do. You line 13 up, you knock 13 down. And I've done the mock draft out at the College Football Playoff Committee site, and I'm with you. The committee was consistent with their approach until the final week, and they did something they had never done before. And it wasn't a matter of whether you thought Florida State was one of the four best teams. The committee told you, even prior to the ACC Championship game, that Florida State, without their starting quarterback, was one of the four best teams. Why do I say that? It's not subjective.
Right.
Go look at the standings. Go look at what the committee told us, and that was Florida State, when they beat Florida heading into the ACC Championship game, the committee told us that Florida State was one of the four best teams. And what did they do? They beat a top 15 team in Louisville without their starting quarterback. And the reward was, by the way, you're going to get shafted. And I thought it was the most inconsistent thing they've done ever as far as the committee. And I know the committee changes each and every year, but it was absolutely ridiculous. And, of course, the narratives and the spins and all that stuff prior to and afterwards were almost nauseating, quite frankly. And I'm not telling you that Florida State without Jordan Travis it was one of the four best teams. Again, if it were up to me, probably not. But my opinion meant zero. The committee told me they were number 3 heading into that week. So,
right.
Again, that's old news. It's the rearview mirror. But as we now move to this expanded 12-field team routine, I got news for you. If you think it's going to be easier, the spins are already starting. You can already see narratives about certain leagues and conferences. And, we have a thing at the ESPN called FPI, and they came out with their preseason poll. I think they had 11 SEC teams in the top 20. Again, I think the SEC is a great league. And I've been on the earth for a long time. There's never been 11 teams from one league in the top 20 ever in my lifetime when it comes to football. So we'll see how it plays out. But the bottom line for the ACC, those games you listed are all critical. Those are things you have to have on the resume when at the end of the year, if you don't get the automatic bid by being the ACC champ and you're sitting there at 10-2 or 11-2 or whatever the combination may be, you got to have something on the resume that says, guess what? We beat teams X, Y, and Z. Therefore, we should be one of those 12 teams. It's going to be interesting.
Mark Packer at Mark Packer on Twitter. ACC Network is joining us here in the Adam Gold Show. I'm just going to go back to the last, their reasoning or their poll, whatever, which kept Florida State out. They judged it based on the third-string quarterback, not even the second-string quarterback, right? Because it was the third-string quarterback that ended up playing against Louisville. So they judged it on a quarterback who wasn't going to play in the playoff game because the second-string quarterback had a concussion that they thought could play, but we don't really need him. So they were using a metric they really didn't have to. And if they really thought Florida State was so bad, why did they still have them ahead of Georgia? Why was Florida State 5th? They should have dropped Florida State to like 8th if they really thought that Florida – they're just not the same team, but they're better than Georgia.
Adam, they had the committee, again, not me or you or any
Right.
talking head with an opinion, and we all have one, but if the committee had dropped Florida State out of the top 4 after their game against Florida, and people would have said, how in the world did you drop them? They're still undefeated. Well, we dropped them because we believe that based on Jordan Travis's inability to play, while they're very good and talented and they are undefeated, we think they're the 5th or 6th or 7th best team. Had they done that prior to the ACC Championship game, I would have had no issue with it. None. Zero. But they didn't do that. What they did is confirm that they thought they were one of the 4 best teams in college football heading into the championship weekend, and Florida State did what they were supposed to do, and that is win. Again, it's one of the all-time screw jobs. But, it's over, it's done with, and hopefully Florida State can use that for some incentive. But I thought the committee, for the first time in the 10 years, was so wildly inconsistent when it mattered the most. And like you said, they've done it's a tough job. I thought for the most part they've done a great job lining up the 4 teams, but I thought that was a complete whiff for Florida State.
Well, let's talk about the Clemson Tigers because I understand it's last year is last year. Changing the narrative, we've already talked about winning some of these games, winning enough of the games, the right games. I think Clemson doesn't necessarily have to beat Georgia, but they have to look like they could. Right, that game has to be maybe a similar game to what we saw a few years ago. I know the Tigers only lost, I think it was it 7-3 or 10-3?
Yeah, 10-3 here in Charlotte. That was an opener right here. Yep.
Defensive touchdown early. Yep. That was the only touchdown of the game. So the Tigers need to look the part. They don't necessarily have to win it. But Cade Klubnik this year, I know that this was another. I guess Heather Dinich is a friend, said, I want to see it from Cade Klubnik before I believe that Clemson can be a college football playoff team. I don't think she's wrong. I think we have seen enough mediocre football from Clemson's quarterback, not just him, by the way, others too, to say, all right, we need to see their offense look like it could be a championship caliber offense. But if they are, they're a playoff team.
Well, their defense certainly is, right? I know they lost a bunch of dudes in the NFL. They always do, but their defense is going to be really salty. And the quarterback always gets all the praise and all the hate when things are great or things are awful. And Klubnik definitely has to be more consistent. There's no doubt about that. But the wide receiver core, Clemson, when they went through that great run that Dabo had when he's always in the national championship game and won 2 of them, lost 2 of them, their wide receivers were elite, spectacular, long, athletic, could stretch the field. And while they continue to recruit and bring in 4- and 5-star guys, and I'm not a recruiting guy, they really haven't had those dudes, if you will, at wide receiver. And so therefore, you go through just an okay offensive line, wide receivers last year that were all hurt for the most part. Not that it's an excuse, but they just didn't have guys. And a quarterback that's inconsistent. I mean, that's basically the perfect remedy for a team that's not going to scare anybody offensively, and your defense can only hold up for so long. And, of course, we treat Clemson like they've fallen off the map. They only won 9 games last year, and that's the worst they've done since 2010. I mean, so we're judging them by a different set of parameters and eyes and so forth. But, Klubnik has to be better. I mean, there's no question about that. But I think even more importantly, Clemson's got to get back to finding some guys. And then from what I hear, these freshman wide receivers look fantastic. But again, we'll find out more when they play Georgia, the number 1 team in the country. And I'm with you, too. They're a 2-touchdown underdog. That can't be a game that they go down and just get waxed, in which almost they look flat like they did last year against Duke in the opener, and people are like, yikes, what is that all about? So they have to look the part. Georgia's obviously favored. If the Dogs win, nobody's going to be surprised. But Clemson needs to come out of that game feeling about, guess what? You know what? Not only did we win, she shocked the world, or we lost a tough game. So I think they've got the chance to make life interesting in that game against Georgia. And I think that defense is going to be good. And if you tell me Klubnik's going to be good and those wide receivers develop, they should be extremely good.
Let me ask you one quick question about Florida State, then a bigger picture question for Mark, but not Florida State, about NC State, and then a bigger picture question about the league as a whole. The Wolfpack have that Week 2 game in Charlotte against Tennessee, an enormous nationally televised game of huge importance, maybe more for the ACC than the SEC since their reputation is baked in. And then in week 4, they are in Death Valley. So we're going to find out. I don't know, maybe we don't find out, but I guess we'll find out in a positive way. If State belongs, we only got 4 weeks to figure that out.
Totally agree. And I will tell you, we've been doing this ACC Network road trip, and I was part of the trip to Raleigh a couple of weeks ago to see NC State's practice and all the interviews and so forth. I really, again, I know it's a practice. It's August. Everybody's undefeated. I get all that. This is a good-looking team.
Yeah.
They've got so many more offensive weapons than they did a year ago. KC was fantastic a year ago. He's beefed up, and he knows he got between Noah Rogers and everybody else that they brought in. Can't wait to see how Grayson McCall does. I think he's going to be really good. I just trust Tony Gibson, even though you lose Peyton Wilson. I just trust the system and the way Dave Dorn's been able to develop talent on the defensive end. They're long and they're athletic in the secondary. And I love the schedule. I mean, the 2 games you pointed out, are they important? You better believe they're important, because if you don't win the ACC Championship, those are games you've got to have on the resume. You know, you've got to beat Tennessee if you don't win the ACC Championship. You know, you only see really one ranked team of note moving forward after that, and that's the trip to Death Valley where the Tigers have really had State's number. But I think that will be an incredibly competitive game. And if you tell me NC State goes 2-0, Adam, I think they're off to the races.
Yeah.
I think they come through the tunnel every week and say, quite frankly, we're just better than you. Even if they go 0-2 in those games, I still think they can win the other 10 and see where it goes. I think NC State's chances of getting to the ACC Championship game, a place they've never ventured to yet, it's never been better. And when you start talking about the depth of the league at top, whether you like Florida State or Clemson or Miami or Virginia Tech or SMU, or pick your poison, whatever you like, I like NC State's schedule better than all of them. I think they're going to be really talented, really good. I think their defense will travel on the road. I got trust in Grayson McCall with his experience and more weapons around him. Jordan Waters running the football. I love him. Love that addition. If I'm an NC State fan, I am buying all kinds of stock. If we get to the end of the year and you call me up in December and you say, man, NC State went 9-3, I would say, you know what, that's almost a disappointing year based on what I think they're going to do this season, because I think they're going to be better than that.
All right, final question, and I'm going to circle it all the way back to the beginning, the joke about needing a Paul Finebaum. Do you think media influence contributed to that decision? Because I think this is my whole read on it, is that it wasn't media influence, it was Alabama. If there was another SEC team in that field, Alabama wouldn't have had to have been selected. But because how can we have a college football playoff, a 4-team playoff, without a team from the SEC? Because that was a phrase that was uttered, that was the reason why Florida State ultimately got hosed. But there was an influence with that, whether it was Nick Saban or it was Greg Sankey or it was any of the number of national folks on the 4-letter network.
I think whether we're talking sports or politics or anything else, can the media have an influence? Of course it can. I mean, anybody that says otherwise is either naive or stupid. Could it have an influence? Yeah, but quite frankly, had the committee done their job and stayed consistent with what they've done since 2014, it wouldn't have mattered what Adam Gold, Mark Packer, Kirk Herbstreit, or Joe the Cow would have said about who in the world should have been in the playoff. What would have been done, even with everybody having a chance to get on the docket and say, hey, listen, here's what I believe from the highest heavens. So, at some point in time, you hope the best teams play for a championship. But could the media have an influence? I don't think there's any doubt about that.
We need a Joe the Cow. We don't need a Paul Finebaum. Mark Packer, ACC Network, at Mark Packer on Twitter. Thank you very much for the time, man. I'll talk to you soon.
You got it, Adam. Have a good weekend. Take care.
You too. Mark Packer here on The Adam Gold Show.